just a bit of background on the band and how it all came together. Musk Ox is European folk style, sounded really authentic to me, to the point where I thought you guys were actually Scandinavian, so it's a bit of a surprise that you guys are actually Canadian. So, yeah, just a bit of a backstory on that, if you don't mind.
Sure. Maybe I'll just take this one, I guess, if that's cool. Yeah, like basically, it's influenced by a lot of European and Scandinavian music, so the sound is kind of there. But yeah, basically it started as a solo thing. I released a record in 2000 and unofficially 2007, but then in 2009, and that was as Musk Ox, but it was just kind of a solo instrumental acoustic album. And I never really planned on doing any shows, and I had done some demos before that. And then around that time, I connected with Raf, and we started working together. And so he joined very soon after that, and then Evan joined a few years later. But we were already playing together, so it started off as just me being very influenced by the acoustic side of metal albums, and then discovering sort of early Ulver and Imperium and Tenhi and this kind of like dark acoustic metal adjacent style of music, and at the same time I was getting really into post rock, so I was kind of curious about mixing early Ulver with Mogwai and seeing what happens, and that was sort of the beginning of it. And then once Raf joined, we started adding Raf added his whole influence into it, and we were getting more into progressive metal and black metal, and so these things kind of evolved, and then Evan came in and adds his own spirit to it, and yeah, and then we did. Anyways, that was kind of the beginning of it. So it was influenced by the second Ulver album. So that Scandinavian folk, is definitely a big part of the DNA of the music.
Right.
Yeah, I don't think we have any really, well, very few actually Canadian influences in what we do. I think it's mostly European music to begin with. It's just what we've listened to and kind of what's in the roots of the music on different levels, regardless of what we're respectively bringing to the table. So I think, yeah, it's just come about very naturally. But then at the same time, I think that because we aren't from those cultures directly, that we're bringing something that is kind of uniquely Canadian to it in terms of the type of landscape that the music is evoking, and I guess maybe the expansiveness of the compositions and even maybe the length. I don't know. I think that there's something about what we do that, yeah, it has those roots, but then it's also commenting on it from a different place.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
like you hold up with, it really does sound like authentic Scandinavian sort of atmospheric, sort of atmospheric black metal kind of sound. Like I said, I was really surprised to see that he was a Canadian. So yeah, good job on that, definitely. So for those reading and listening, just tell them what chamber folk is and how it influenced you guys as musicians.
Well, I think basically chamber music is kind of more of a technical term when you think about it, because it's just describing musicians who are playing acoustic music generally in a smaller space, and it's a smaller ensemble. And we are exactly that, right? We're an acoustic trio. I think that the folk element comes maybe more from the fact that there's a guitar instead of like a piano, for example, because normally this configuration would be like a piano trio. But I think having a guitar kind of lends itself more to that folk style, and also I think the use of kind of, it's like a very diatonic melody and like chord progressions um, and repeated structures and things like that. And I think also this kind of this sort of like a reverence for nature in the work that you can kind of hear just in the atmosphere. It sort of evokes nature and these different landscapes in a very abstract way. So it feels kind of rustic too. So I would say those elements kind of feed into, I guess, what makes our music chamber folk. I mean, to be able to describe it in a more general way, it would be harder, I think, just because everyone has their own take on that. And I think that groups that play that type of music do it differently.
Yeah, basically, if I can just build on that, yeah, I think it's, yeah, like what Raf was saying, a lot of the structures, and I think also the imagery too is more of like a folk kind of imagery as well. So I think that to me it's this, and I think, and we've talked about this in other interviews where people say, oh, it's hard to describe what you're doing. And, I think that that's a great compliment, because I think with so much music out these days, everything is kind of, all the streams are there. So it's like, do you want to be this kind of band or this kind of band? And it's hard to sort of find the little gaps in between genres. And I think with this record, especially, we're able to kind of find a path that I think is unique to us.
Your own, yeah, definitely. Well, this one will be for you, Nathan, and Evan, if you want to put 2 cents into it. But to me, I feel like the Night Watch sounds like a busier version of Musk Ox. Feels like a distant relative living in a bustling town, as opposed to Musk Ox, which resides in like the wilderness. What made you want to move towards Musk Ox's exclusive acoustic sound?
I mean, Musk Ox started off acoustic. It always kind of was acoustic, so it's almost the other way around. It's more like, because Musk Ox started first, and then me and Evan were yeah.
I thought Night Watch came first.
Well, yeah, the history goes back even before that, because when I was starting to do Musk Ox demos, I was playing with Evan in this project called the Butternuts, and Evan can I don't know, you can talk a bit about that history if you want, Evan.
Okay, sure. Yeah, we connected, I guess it was back in 2006, and me and Nathaniel and a harmonica player, and we used to get together, and we used to perform in like a bar late at night, and it was a lot of fun. The project only lasted for about a year, but we made a little CD and everything. I'm sure it's still out there. But from there, yeah, I guess Nathaniel connected with Daniel, who we used to know from university, and then they started jamming, and then they invited me to a session, and we used some of the Butternut songs that we had, and yeah, it just fit really well with the more heavy kind of band. In that kind of setting, and so I had an electric violin. I took that out, and it just all kind of came together, and we formed the Night Watch, which was obviously not quite as chamber folk as the Musk Ox, in the sense that it's much more electric, and just by using, amplified instruments gives you a whole other plethora of sound and of opportunity of creating different kind. I guess it's a lot of fun. A lot of opens up a lot of different soundscapes. If I may say.
Yeah, and for the history, like when I was recording the first Musk Ox record, that same summer, myself and Evan and our friend Miles, who plays harmonica, we were recording the Butternuts album, which was sort of like folk, like chamber folk, but with some more jazz and blues. And so those albums, so it's almost like, yeah, and that Butternuts album, yeah, ended up, as Evan was saying, like spawning the Night Watch. And so it's almost like Musk Ox and the Night Watch kind of like did sort of happen at the same time, and so I would say they're less distant relatives. They're more like siblings.
Yeah. So basically, Night Watch was basically like you've already said. It was you sort of looking to sort of build on the sort of the base, like sort of the how to word it. Just try to expand on the sound, the Musk Ox sound. That was basically it?
No, we were expanding it on the Butternut sound, which was our trio. But like, I was doing a lot of acoustic stuff. Both of them were acoustic at the same time. It's just that we ended up doing this jazz trio and turning it metal. But the thing is, some Musk Oxers have actually ended up in Night Watch songs, and so there's been a little bit of cross-pollination in there. So.
Right. Cool. Well, like you've already said, given the unique sound that you've got from Musk Ox, are there other bands that are like-minded like you where you live, and what's the music scene like where you are?
Well, I don't think there's any bands like us here, apart
It's
from
pretty
maybe
much within our own,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like other projects that we all have either individually or with other people are similar in some respects, but otherwise, I mean, I can't really think of any groups. There's this Ulvesong group that from
Oh yeah.
Nova Scotia. I guess they're like kind of similar, but I mean, Nova Scotia is really far away. I mean, I wouldn't even consider it our area. It's part of Canada, but like,
Yeah.
and then there's like, there's different things happening in Canada, but again, like, if it's outside of Ontario or Quebec, I would consider it like a different region,
Hmm.
because it's like when you're talking about like local scenes and things like that, it's no longer really applicable. And in Ottawa, I think like hip hop is really big in Ottawa right now.
Is it?
Like,
Right.
yeah, I think that's kind of like right now that's sort of what's popular and what a lot of people are doing. Um, I think like in a couple of decades ago, I feel like in the zeros, metal was really big here, but I feel like metal has really kind of subsided.
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like Ottawa's a funny city because it doesn't really have the infrastructure to support a music scene properly. So, these bands kind of appear and then sort of hit a crest, and then they just sort of either they move somewhere else, or they kind of just, they kind of go back into sort of almost like a hibernation, because it's like an animal that it's like the ecosystem can't really support it. So then I think it's kind of a similar thing here. So we're kind of, I think we try to exist independently of the place where we live, and I think that doesn't really affect us. It's more just we just try to make the best music that we can, and we all happen to be in this area, so we can get together and do it.
Right.
Yeah, I think Ottawa also is in an interesting place because we're 5 hours east of Toronto and 2 hours west of Montreal, and so those two cities have, they're the biggest metropolis cities in Canada. So it's, other than maybe Vancouver, and so they have, like Montreal has, Constellation Records and Godspeed You Black Emperor, and Toronto has like, Do Makes They Think and Broken Social Scene and all these other, like they've and Montreal also has Arcade Fire, whatever. Like they've created these scenes, and I think I've always been very proud to be creating something here that's our own. And I think, like you were asking about scenes and what we sort of hinted at earlier, is that, for me this scene is us. It's we each have solo stuff. Raf has the Visit, and and I do, and we do the Night Watch. So it's like we've kind of created our own sort of scene of like chamber metal, acoustic, ambient, post kind of stuff. And every time we release new things, certain journalists kind of notice. They say, "Oh, okay, yeah, Raph plays with Leprous, and oh, Nathaniel played with Agalok, and like, oh, there's the Night Watch with Evan, and oh, and Nathaniel did the solo thing, and Raph did a solo thing," and we're sort of like just slowly kind of building this catalog of our own kind of what we want to hear, and that's unique to us. Not thinking like, okay, we need to go to Montreal and make it there, or need to go to Toronto and find something else. Like we've always been more like, let's do something great that like people around the world will love, and then eventually people will care about it here, maybe.
Well, Canada's not a very, I mean, okay, you're more positive about things. You talk about all the good selling points about, I'll just talk about all the shitty things. But like, like Canada is not supportive of its artists. Like, and generally it's like a boomerang effect where like you get big elsewhere, and then Canada follows the lead of other countries like the US and the UK, and,
Yeah.
and so on. And it's like, oh, okay, this artist is doing well here. Okay, now we can like them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like, okay, yes, sir. You know what I mean? And you know what I mean? I'm not gonna wait around for that. It's like we're just gonna do our thing, and we'll still be there. I think the important thing is longevity. It's like some people, they might, for example, get signed early and like they have a lot of opportunities coming to them. But where are they in 20 years? Like if they're still doing it, then good on them. But if not, it's like, why didn't that work out for them? You have to ask those questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It's really hard to make a career out of the scene around here, especially Ottawa, right? You play like small venues where, you get a handful of people coming out, make a handful of fans, but, mostly people come out here for like the blues festival you see thousands of people coming out, and like Raf was saying, like hip hop has become very popular amongst the youth, and you see that reflected in the bands that perform at like Blues Fest and so forth. But outside of these big festivals, the music scene is quite I don't know how to say cult or whatever, or very small.
Yeah.
It's a lot of underground stuff, and I think also very small pockets. And unfortunately, those pockets don't cross-pollinate very much. But what we do have here, which is extremely advantageous to us, is we have a very affluent population that can afford to go see concerts, and they have time and extra spending money, and they're pretty open-minded. Many people actually, if you can get them in the room, or if you can get them interested, it's like, you know, there's a lot of potential audience, but unfortunately, people have to be educated a little bit more on like what being a musician is actually like, and what goes into the craft, and the fact, you know, the amount of work involved, and the sort of all what that entails. And I think that will interest people here more in like delving into what's happening, you know, not just those who are curious or those who want to kind of who are just kind of art connoisseurs, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also think that you guys saying that there, you're building a foundation as well, aren't you? So anyone that is interested, if the scene is as sort of averse to what you guys are doing, the ones that do get what you're doing, they'll be loyal, be a loyalty there, won't there? So it's catch-22, and I think the fans that you do have there, like I said, they're loyal, and it's better than that being sort of like part of a fad that sort of disappears after a couple of years. So
I think there's a lot of factors, but ultimately, like for me, and I'm sure it's the same for the other guys, like when I was starting out, right, like I heard these records that I thought were just incredible, and I thought, like, could I make a record that can give somebody else this feeling of like, wow, this is amazing, you know, like just it's not like, okay, can I be welcomed into this room with these people and will they accept me? It's like, you know, I think we all have a high standard, right? Like we work really, really hard to make the music that we make, and we're not thinking like, oh, is it good enough here? You know, I think like, who are the bands that influence me, and can this music stand alongside them? You know, and that's not for us to decide. It's for us to strive towards. And then when people, you know, review it and get, you know, say kind words and say, oh, this makes me think of this, you know, that's icing on the cake. But ultimately, you know, you have to just try to create the best work possible, and you know, put it out there so that people can hear it, and the reactions and where it fits, it's out of your hands ultimately.
I think one of the big sort of factors in what we do is that because we're not living in a big music center, instead of trying to be part of trying to get into the big building, we just built our own, you know what I mean? Because that's kind of what we were left with, essentially. It's like, okay, well, let's just build something over time, over a long period, that, you know, has longevity and is meaningful, hopefully, to other people, and, you know, that means something to us. That we care about, because obviously, you know, when you spend as much time as you do on albums, like obviously on our latest album, you know, it took several years to finally get it all completed, but it's like you have to really care about something like that to see it through all the way. And I think that it's kind of almost like a miraculous thing to be able to finish a record and like put it out there. You know, it's a lot that goes into that, and like everyone has to be a finisher. You know, you can't be someone who starts something and then abandons it. You have to be a finisher, and that's really difficult, and it requires like overcoming a lot of mental barriers to get there, and to negotiate so many factors along the way.
Cool. So I mean, how did you guess to see you guys are all multi-instrumentalists anyway? But what drew you guys to playing instruments like a cello and the violin?
Evan?
What drew me in? Well, it was just a coincidence. My mom signed me up for violin lessons, and I just took to it, and discovered, you know, I have a an appreciation for the music. Just had a talent for it, so I pursued. Basically, that's what it comes down to. I pursued classical training, conservatory, and then I also discovered that I really enjoyed like improvising, which is not necessarily common for a lot of classical musicians. So it also just blended well to joining these other bands such as Musk Ox and the Night Watch, where you put your creative output is very important to the development and the creation of the music. So I consider myself more than just a classical musician. I embody all styles, and I'm out there to create and to make new music, and that's, I think, part of who I am as a musician. It's more than just, as a classical musician, we just we're playing what's on the page. We're trying to convey what the composer was trying to convey. But personally, I also feel that as a musician, I'm trying to express my own personal take, my own feelings, my own expression, which I find very interesting to be able to do that. It kind of flows naturally, and to allow that, to just tap into that expression, I feel I'm very lucky to be able to do that, and
Yeah, I feel similarly. It's kind of like being just a player. Like, there's a lot of instrumentalists out there, a lot of classical instrumentalists who are, they're taking all the gigs and they're playing what's put in front of them, and that's what they do. And but it's kind of like you could replace that person with any other person with the same qualifications, and it would pretty much work out the same, with minor variations, of course. And for me, I've never wanted to get lost in the shuffle of that. I always wanted to have my own voice and be a creative artist, because I actually, cello is like my main instrument, but I feel like that's just kind of by happenstance, things just sort of ended up that way. But for me, I feel more like, I'm a composer and an improviser, and that's what I am actually kind of good at. And the cello thing is just something I had to work hard at, to be able to be good enough to express my ideas and articulate them well. So yeah, and in my case, just starting out, I was asked as a kid if I wanted to take piano lessons, and I said I want to take cello lessons, because it was just something different from the usual, and I liked the instrument, and I'd heard it on recordings, and I thought it was pretty cool. So that's how I got into it.
It shows how myopic my... Oh, sorry. Go on, Nathan.
Oh, no, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay. No, I was just trying to say, it shows how myopic my viewpoint is, because when I my mentality was, I'll learn bass guitar, because nobody really wants to play bass, so I'll play that. But you don't really, where I live, you don't really see people go, I'm going to learn the cello. And it's a shame, really, because I think violin and cello in particular, they're such emotive instruments. If you like that sort of thing, you get far more from that than you would from a bass guitar. So I think it's great that you guys saw things like that before you started playing it.
Yeah, and it's very interesting too, because for me, like, I feel so lucky to play with Evan and Raph, and I almost feel like I have a hard time listening to other string players sometimes, because I'm like, oh, it's not like it's like they've ruined it for me almost. Like I'm like violin, like they've set the bar so high for me. It's like, oh, there's a violin on this album. Okay, let me hear what you got, But also it's not just like how technically proficient, how beautiful the sound is, right? Because that's just one facet of it, right? Like the spirit that they bring to the instruments and the creativity, right? They're very, Raph and Evan are very unique musicians, because they have this rigid, like very, very strict classical training, so they've learned their tools, but then like you marry that with like just this creative energy and spirit, and then the magic really comes through that, you know. And another thing that's great, you know, playing with Evan in the Night Watch is that like Evan didn't necessarily grow up listening to metal or prog or these kinds of things, so as much as, you know, myself or Raf, so which I think is fantastic, because, you know, with the Night Watch, when myself and Dan, the drummer, you know, we have a lot of similar influences from, you know, metal and prog, and when we write something and then bring it to Evan doesn't think like a violinist who likes metal. He's just like, okay, what does my spirit want to bring to this music? And it's not like, okay, I need to sound like a heavy metal violinist, you know what I mean? And I think that's, I don't know, that's really wonderful. And I think, you know, as a music fan, I love to, if I discover a band that's fantastic, like I'll just analyze them and study them and try to get to the essence of like, why is this so special? And pretty much every time it's because you have these personalities coming together, that it's only this music can be made by these individuals. You know, you have obviously they have to have skill and that kind of thing, but when you see it come together, and that's what makes something unique. And I think that with Musk Ox, we have that, where, and with the Night Watch as well, and our unique creative identities have space here to express themselves. So yes, we sound good on our instruments and we're able to write interesting music, but when you listen to us play, it's like, oh, okay, that's Raph, oh, that's Evan, that's Nathaniel. Like that's one thing that, you know, you can't learn that. It's just when you have people come together and meet in the middle and decide, okay, like, what are we going to do? And let's do it the best that we can. And let's all have space to express ourselves. You know, it doesn't matter what instruments you're playing, you know, then you get something more than just, okay, like it's a band with musicians playing a song, you know?
Yeah.
So,
yeah, there's a connection that you won't find anywhere else. I completely get that.
It's like if you listen to like a band like Tool, you know, it's like those guys together, you hear each of their personalities come together, right?
Yeah.
And the way that it all fits, you know, and there's tons of examples, but that to me has always been the most exciting thing. And that's to me what elevates music beyond just, you know, just, okay, we're going to get together and make some sounds that are good.
Yeah.
And I think that's what connects with people too. Yeah.
I think there's something to be said for bringing influences to the music that aren't already sort of native to the format you're working in. So, for example, with the Night Watch, it's like playing more kind of metal music that might be at certain times influenced by like jazz and swing, you know, and then that kind of brings a freshness. Or like with Musk Ox, playing chamber music that's often influenced by metal. Whereas if you're just playing like metal that's influenced by metal, or classical that's influenced by classical, you know, then it's probably not going to be as interesting. But I think, when you're taking an idea from one place and then you're filtering it through a different sort of medium, then you're bound to get kind of these new combinations and results that are exciting to the ear. And as much as maybe some people would deny it, I think that like what the ear really gravitates to is a new stimulus. Like, you know, we're not, once something repeats itself many times and we're used to it, it's no longer very exciting. But when you're hit with something that is unfamiliar, then that attracts your senses, you know, and your ear is drawn to it. So I think that's the real value and uniqueness, or freshness, I guess, in the ideas and the sound, is that the human ear is just drawn to it that much more.
Cool. Right, so when I was doing a little bit of research for this interview, I noticed the EPs. So this will be aimed at you, Nathan, if that's okay. When I saw the EPs, it brought a smile to my face, because when my band did their first EP years and years ago, I made some special physical copies that had paintings, and they were seasonal paintings based on the elements, because I had a bit of an obsession with that sort of thing. So, question is, what spurred you on to make those seasonal EPs?
I think at that point, This was 2005, so right, no smartphones, like no social media. I think at that point when I was started playing classical and taking it seriously, something about the sound of the classical guitar just evokes that imagery. I don't know what it is, for me at least, like a sound of like an ambient plucked classical just evoke nature. And also, growing up, I grew up on the east coast of Canada and in a small town and right by the ocean, and so I spent a lot of time in nature. But it wasn't until I left Nova Scotia that I don't know, and I moved to Ottawa, that kind of, I don't know, I didn't really plan it. It just kind of happened that way. Like once I started, obviously I got really into Imperium and Tenhi and these more nature focused bands with that kind of imagery, so that it just resonated. It just felt like I don't know, like when I played that sparse kind of music and then I added some flutes and some water sounds, it just, I don't know, that's what needed to come out, I guess. Like it just, which was funny because for years before that I was doing heavy metal journalism, and I was like, I moved to Ottawa to go to journalism school because I thought I'd be a heavy metal journalist. And then I met like a professor and I was like, oh, I'm going to learn guitar from you. And then I thought, okay, well, if I want to be a metal guitarist, I'm going to learn classical first because that's a good foundation. And like 16 years later, I'm still playing it. And yeah, it at that point, also I was taking some like long bus trips. Like I took a long bus trip across Canada and to visit my mom who lives like on the other side of Ontario. And so I was, and again, at that point, I wasn't on the bus just scrolling on my phone. I was just like looking out the window and just observing the Canadian landscape, because when I was growing up in Nova Scotia, we had done some road trips, but I had never seen the rest of the country. So, and that all influenced Musk Ox because, Musk Ox is a, a Canadian creature, a very ancient creature, representing the natural world. And so that just resonated with this project where, because I didn't want to try to pretend like we're from a country that we're not. Like I wanted really to represent, Canada. So I love the Ulver album, the acoustic one, but I was like, oh, the songs are too short. Like I wanted something big and expansive because that's how Canada feels to me. And this is, if it's folk music, I wanted to represent the landscape. So yeah, it just kind of happened that way with those EPs. When I sat down to play and I was just imagined landscapes. So that just kind of came through in the artwork and in the music.
Yeah, cool. So with the debut album, there's an obvious disparity. I think you've touched on this already, but there's an obvious disparity in the production quality from the initial 2007 release and the re-release of 2009 release. I think you alluded to it before. So the reason why it got re-released was down to signing to a label. Is that what it was?
Yeah. I found a label, who was willing to help like release the album and actually like promote it, because I had just printed a CDR, like 50 CDRs, and then just like, yeah. So a journalist had heard it and was like, oh, I want to help you release it. So that's sort of like where that happened, and that helped a lot. That helped a lot. Yeah.
I'd only listened to it a couple of days ago, and I listened to the 2007 one first. And I thought, it's a re-release, and I listened to it, and I was blown away. Like the quality is just, it's amazing. But what made you want to expand on the track listing as well?
For the re-release?
Yeah.
He had just said if we're re-releasing it, we should add a bonus track. And also for the 2007 version I put on Bandcamp, that one is actually the unmastered version, because the original master I wasn't quite happy with, and so that's partly why it sounds quite different.
Right. Right, cool. Talking still on the debut, there's a peppering of vocal chants and stuff, which adds like an extra layer of emotion to the soundscape. What made you omit it from the writing process in future works?
I don't know. It just, like even when Raph joined the band, we would actually do those vocal parts live. I don't know. It wasn't even a conversation. I think we just decided like, I think we just wanted it to be instrumental. It's funny looking back at the debut because I think at that point I was less, I had less knowledge about music and composing. So I think I was almost more intuitive than, I think it was easier for me to be intuitive then because that's mostly what I had to rely on. Whereas now I know theory and technique and these kinds of things. So sometimes it can actually be a barrier to get to the more intuitive playing. So when it's funny because even when I look back at that first album, it's almost like I'm like, why did I do that? But I don't remember making that decision. It just happened, and
Right.
I think it's important to remember that, to be like, oh yeah, like that's just happened, you know? Because I think as you get better and as you build a catalog and people are like, oh, I love Woodfall, like then you become a bit more calculated, and so it's important to. But yeah. But I think the best stuff is more intuitive.
Yeah.
I think your first record is always intuitive in a way, because especially if you don't really have an existing audience, then you have no expectations to fulfill except your own. But even there, if you're going about it for the first time, then there's this feeling of just following your instincts fully. And I mean, definitely when we made this last record, we made it almost in response to Woodfall. Like otherwise we might not have done it, or we've done a very different record. But the goal was very much like, okay, we're gonna make a better version of this type of format, and improve on all the aspects of that style of writing and this configuration, and the, you know, just the length of the songs and the way they're structured and the production and the playing and all the aspects of it, really. So I think it's just like a different mindset that you're in. And I think with the chants and stuff, I was gonna say, it's like, the question like, oh, why are there no growls anymore? Hey, why no screaming vocals in the music? Or can you do some growls again?
Why no crickets?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no nature sounds. Well, and that's actually something too. There's no nature sounds on the new record, whereas there are in the previous ones. But with the chants, it was kind of like we had a year's worth of playing together as a trio with a different violinist right before Evan joined. And that was kind of like, I think that was sort of like the end of that old period, you know what I mean? And then once Evan came in, then it was like, now we're in a new period and we're sort of operating a bit differently, and we were focused on the Woodfall material, and, you know, we're playing trio music, and it was like very technical music, and there's like no place in it for any singing. It's just like, okay, we're instrumentalists and we're very serious and playing complicated stuff with a lot of time signatures and really long songs, and we're going to play like an hour for you without stopping, you know, and all this kind of stuff. It was, I mean, to me, it's like that very different ethos in terms of like, you know, the whole approach to the music and performing it, right? Whereas in the earlier days, especially the first year that I was in the band, like 2009 to 2010, it was a lot folkier and a little bit more kind of free in a way. And the context we were playing in and everything, it was just different. So I feel like that was sort of the last iteration of that kind of older and maybe folkier and more sparse sound before we were like trying to be all instrumental prog. So.
Yeah. And I still feel like I still feel like, so there was like the first album and then it kind of went this way. And like, I still feel like I may just go and do another solo record that maybe builds off of that first. I feel like kind of revisiting that. So, but just as a solo thing. But I mean, who knows, that sort of approach might find its way into Musk Ox again, or who knows? Yeah.
That being said, we also still play these old songs as a trio.
Yeah.
Without the,
and actually, we played some of the stuff from the first album, and actually there's some songs that never really got performed from the first album that we did as a trio. We actually played the whole first album in its entirety, and that was really fun, actually, like to kind of rearrange some of it. And I think like the most satisfying thing is to like mix and match some of those like older pieces with the newer ones, like to kind of have a smattering of songs from the 3 albums that we play. It's just kind of cool to see them sort of like lined up against each other. And I think it makes for a good ebb and flow, because you have like some pieces, like obviously like Windswept on Woodfall is like a really dense and kind of busy piece. And then like Ritual on Inheritance is also like that. I think like those pieces have a lot going on in them. So it's good to have some other ones like kind of scattered in between that have a bit more space. I think it's good for the audience too, because like
it's good for us too, because we can just relax a little bit. We can kind of just like, even just when we did the anniversary show and we did the first song on the debut album, and we just when we like rearranged the intro, because on the album it's got like piano, and we like arranged that for all of us, and it was really slow, and I don't know, it felt really nice, like when we were all playing that together, like having those moments. I think I could see us later like finding a balance where, and I think we did do that with Inheritance, where Woodfall was pretty like go like busy the whole time, whereas like with Inheritance we were able to kind of mix it up, like with the intro track, with the first song Premonition. It's like it's almost more like a harkening back to the debut album, right? Just with all that kind of space, and then which I think that's one of my favorite parts of the new album is the flow of it. It really kind of gives you, I think it has the biggest peaks and valleys of the entire catalog.
Yeah, definitely. The crescendos on that album are incredible. Part 1 and 2, the first 2 tracks, part 1 and 2, the crescendos on that, like, just my hair goes right at the back of my neck. It's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, it's nice to hear. We definitely chiseled away at that for a long time, but also I think just from even on a composition level, like it was kind of built in a little bit more, where there was more room in a way to build to higher climaxes, and then also to have moments of sparseness to contrast with that. And I think that's one of the things that makes it it just makes it more dynamic. It's by far, I think, the most dynamic sound that we've produced on a record.
Yeah, cool. So me and you, Nathan, spoke a little bit already, but I was open when I approached you that I hadn't listened to any of your work beforehand, until the album 1 feature that we do on Sputnik. Obviously, you guys won for July, so that was what spurred me on to check it out. And when I heard it, it blew my socks off. It really did blow my socks off, and it got me thinking. It shows you how music's a powerful agent, and it got in my soul. So my question is, what albums connect to you the same way Inheritance connected to me?
Many of them. I don't know. Yeah, there's so many of them. Like, I think a big one that I talk a lot about is The Mantle by Agalloch.
Oh man,
like that one. Like, I remember as a teenager, recently dumped. I remember hearing a song online, like on the End Records website, and I was like, oh yeah, this sounds cool. Like, it's got acoustic guitars. Like, it didn't like floor me, but I was like, oh, like I'm gonna check that out. And then I got the CD, and then I remember just like putting it in my Discman and like going for a walk through the city, and like it was a gray day, and like I just started in my headphones, and I was just kind of in this trance, and I just sort of like wandered through the city, like on this huge walk, and it's just this moment that really resonated. Like, it just kind of hit me really deeply. And I think, and I talked about this earlier, but just wanting to, like the fact that you can say that the music kind of touched you that way, like that is like the best feedback you can get, because it's just continuing the flow of energy, right, that we receive from this, and then continue it to there, and then you can express that in your life in your own creative way. It doesn't have to be through music, and so so for me, The Mantle by Agalloch is one of those albums, like just the moment that it came in my life, and like it just it really, like, every time I listen to it, really takes me back to Nova Scotia. Nova Scotia is by the ocean, so it's always kind of overcast and rainy, and so the trees have a certain kind of feel and color, and it really brings me back to that. And I'm sure the other guys have their own to share.
Yeah, we've just been doing a couple of like interviews and things like that with different blogs where we talk about albums that influenced us and like favorite albums and stuff we grew up with. I mean, there's so many of them. It's hard to like name one. Like, I don't think I can name one. We talked about a couple, I remember, in this one interview we did. For me, like one that keeps kind of coming back is this album called Cello, just called Cello by David Darling. And it's from the early 90s, came out on ECM Records, and it's like it's this really dark, atmospheric album, obviously 100% cello. It's very elemental and kind of, it's very austere, I think, like throughout. It's really bleak, but so beautiful. It just, you just think about these kind of, like this sort of November weather, and these overcast skies, and it kind of evokes this world without humans that I really like, and I sometimes try to capture that in the music that I make. And it's the record, like this, basically the single record that inspired me to do layered cello recording. And so like when I was, I guess probably 18, when I started 17 or 18, I started doing that like on my own stuff, and I started doing it like as a session musician, doing all these kind of stacked layers of cello. And it kind of came from that record because he was creating these huge dense chords, and it felt like this kind of wave washing over me. It was just like, it was very soothing, but also kind of oppressive in a way too. And yeah, so there's something like really powerful about that album also, because I know so little about how it was made, and it's such a mystery to me, you know, it being from that period where they weren't documenting in the same way that we do now. And, you know, there's like no interviews that I know of about it. And so it just like kind of means something to me in a very singular and opaque way, which I kind of like. So that's one that's like a standout, and I think that it's been an influence ever since.
Go check it out. Where was the guy from? The composer?
He was from the States. So yeah, he just died at the beginning of the year actually. But yeah, I think I'm not sure if he's from the
he's
Midwest.
Oh,
David
actually,
Darling?
No.
I think he's from Indiana.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think so, but I could be wrong. But he's from one of those states. I don't know, but anyway.
What about you, Evan?
Well, same as the other guys. There's a lot of albums that you could choose from. But generally, honestly, I generally get my inspiration just from other violinists that I follow online and so forth. I'm a big lover of classical music myself, and I just really enjoy listening to other violinists play classical music, or there are a lot of new music that's being played, especially during these competitions, these international violin competitions. And some of this new music that's introduced is really cool, really impressive. So I draw a lot of my inspiration from just hearing different music, whether it's been played a million times or it's new contemporary music. I don't know. I just always find a lot of my inspiration from this from classical music these days. Just as a violinist, it connects with me the most.
So do you not really listen to metal albums? Are you primarily just classical and?
I listen to some metal, but honestly, I don't go out of my way to look for new metal albums. But I do occasionally listen to metal. But often when it comes to music, it's through like friends or colleagues that I get introduced to it.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I take to liking that. Or getting, so that's mostly how I discovered music when I was kind of like a teenager, was through friends and going to parties, and I discovered all this new music, and then I also could like share with my friends. There was like a sort of a social aspect to it as well.
Yeah.
So when it comes to metal, it's kind of maybe the same as where somebody introduced this band, I'm like, oh, this is nice, and then we kind of like listen it together as a social environment where I kind of like take a liking to it more, but I'm not necessarily like on my computer looking for metal that I enjoy, but I do enjoy many. There's metal is such a a broad. There's so many styles, so there's a lot that's out there that I probably like that I haven't still yet even obviously discovered, but I do appreciate metal as well. Yes.
Yeah. Cool. So in my opinion, I think instrumental albums are probably one of the most difficult albums to make because you don't have the luxury of hiding behind the singer. It carries a lot of the burden. the music has to be really on point, subsistent, keep the listener engaged. How do you approach an album compositionally, and when do you stop and think, yeah, that track's finished?
That's actually a really good question.
Mhm.
I don't believe that it's harder to make instrumental music though. I think personally, I mean, maybe it's just from my own standpoint, but I think probably the other guys will agree. Like, I think it's harder to write music with vocals because people relate to vocals on a much more personal level with like a high degree of subjectivity. And so like when you're hearing a music um, that has vocals in it, like you're relating to that person's voice in the way that you would like relate to any of us speaking, right? Where like it's just we're so used to that form of communication, and we have such strong opinions about the quality of people's voices. So like for me, for example, like if I hear a song and I'm like, oh, cool intro, yeah, I really like it, and then the vocals come in. If I don't like the vocals after like less than 5 seconds, I like turn the volume down. You know what I mean? And for me, often the vocals just ruin it. I'm like, oh, I wish this was instrumental, and that's very personal. But again, that's me maybe being a little bit of a snob or having my own very strong opinions, that we all have strong opinions. But at the same time, I think that it's true that like if a singer is really good, or they connect with the audience in a very particular way, then of course it makes it easier. Like there's less of a barrier to entry. But I think it goes either way. Whereas with instrumental music, it's not like uh, it's not going to be as polarizing in a sense, but you have to create an atmosphere that is interesting, and that tells a story and communicates in a way without words. Whether it's being cinematic, or if it's about sort of the different episodes and the sort of the evolution of the narrative, whatever it is, you have to be able to convey something like that with music, so that it makes sense to a listener. And you have to create emotion, and emotion isn't just technique; it's technique at the service of creating imagery and sensations and ideas. And that's like there's so many layers to that process, right? Like I mean, initially when you get a cool idea and then you start playing it, how do you know it's a cool idea? It's usually because you have this visceral feeling in your body that tells you like, yeah, this is cool, I should pursue this, and see where it leads. And then it's that feeling, that thread that kind of leads you to the next thing. And then maybe you've composed a section, or you've got a little arrangement and stuff, and then that sort of spurs you on to new ideas. But then once you have that full piece, it's not enough to just have the piece. Like it may be good in itself in terms of the structure and the way it's been created, but you still have to play it in a way that's evocative, and the sounds and the timbres and the mix of the instruments, all of those variables have to align in such a way that you're going to have something that's also emotionally captivating and that makes sense when it's put all together. So, I mean, okay, I talked a lot, but there's a lot of different layers to making it effective and good, I guess.
Yeah.
I think yeah, because you said like it's harder to make. I think it depends on the person. Like I think for us, I think it's easier for us to make instrumental music because we've done it for so long. But I think the voice is, because for me, I pretty much exclusively listen to instrumental music. That's sort of the vibe that I've been on for a few years now. I'm just so fascinated with those arrangements. But I can tell that and on a moment's notice, I'm just going to become obsessed with vocals, and I'm just going to dive into that world. But I think it's interesting because I think a human voice can like cut to you, like reach you emotionally so quickly, probably faster than just an instrument. But I think also the challenge of writing vocal and instrumental music is like, I think with instrumental music, I like not forcing an emotion on someone or forcing an idea. I like keeping things open, and I think I think people maybe feel a little more open to receiving what you're giving if it's instrumental. And I also like the idea that there's less pressure in like, okay, and I mean it depends on the music, but I think for us, like, there's definitely emotion there, but we do keep things slightly ambiguous and slightly vague, because I want people to listen and have the space to kind of explore and tell us what it feels like, you know. And I think that's I like that. That's one thing I love about instrumental music, is that it gives me space to feel what I want to feel, right? And whereas like there's beauty to like somebody saying like, this is my lived experience and I'm gonna say it in a few words and hope that you feel what I felt. That's incredible, you know. That's so powerful. And I think that it's that, to me, the ultimate challenge is like, so I think with lyrics and vocals, it's like, how do you say something that's meaningful without sounding like you're trying to say something that's meaningful, right? It's like that's the challenge, right? It's like, this is so meaningful to me, but I don't want it to be like I'm like forcing my meaning onto you, right? And I think that that's what great lyrics do. It's like you can feel what they feel, but then you still have space, right? And I think with instrumental music, the challenge is like, how do you make music with individuals just playing instruments without sounding like you're just individuals playing instruments? Like, to me, how do you elevate beyond that? And I think some music, like some instrumental music, I feel so aware of what's happening. It's like there's a bassist and there's a drummer and there's a guitarist and they're doing these things together. It's like I want to be taken away. Like, I want to forget that, like, what's even happening. To me, that's the goal, is like, and I think that with this record, there's moments where, like, hopefully the whole record, but to me, like, when I listen to the record, it's like, it feels like there's something, it's like I even as somebody that worked on it, it's like you forget that it's just like a cellist and a violinist and a guitarist. It's like, I think there's moments where it's kind of like, it becomes this greater sort of cloud of energy that you're sort of like navigating. Like, to me, that's the ultimate challenge of instrumental music, is I don't want people to just be too aware of like that it's just instruments, you know. Like, I want to create a whole other world. So that's the challenge, and I think we can do that. I think we're able to do that at moments. I don't.
I think sorry.
No, go on, Rob. You're right.
Well, I was just gonna say, that idea of not making it something that's clearly forced, or that you're trying too hard to say something, is important, and just the idea that, you know, I think often instrumental music can be construed as maybe it's a bit navel gazing, you know, depending on the type of music, but like, because by definition, it's like people who are probably quite proficient, just like really focusing on their playing, but it's like that has to serve something greater. And so when you're not so focused on the details of the arrangements right away, or the specific things that each person is playing, but when the overall whole is just sort of transporting you, that's a good sign. And when you have to kind of make a greater effort to focus on those details, to actually perceive them, you know, because it's so seamless. Like, there's a few records I've purchased this year that were like that, instrumental records, where I really felt like, it's like, oh, I need to like kind of rewind and go back to this part because it was really cool, but I missed what happened in a way because it was so seamless. Yeah. And but that was just kind of like a testament to how well written it was and how well paced it was.
You know, I mean, it's like you said there, Raf. You're all on the same wavelength. I think the reason why I asked the question, or the reason why I see it is it can be a pitfall, is because you need to have that narrative in mind, and you don't want to hear some dude fret wanking for 90 minutes, do you? You need something more behind that. And yeah, you nailed that.
I feel like a lot of times where there's a band with the vocals carry the emotion a lot of times, and then the instruments are accompanying the vocalist in a way, right? So the emotion we turn towards the lyrics, towards the singer, and then we focus on, that's the main focus. But when you take the singer away, and I feel like the Night Watch is a good example of that. We don't even think about having a singer in the band, but somehow it's just such exciting music, and we don't even need that. Yeah.
Well, the focal point shifts a lot.
Sorry.
So I was just saying, it's like, it doesn't have to be, okay, where, you know, the default focus is going to be this right now. It has to be because of the configuration. It's like when you have an instrumental combination, it can turn itself inside out so quickly and then go somewhere else. it has this kind of flexibility about it that I like, where you can really focus on the combinations of instruments and the arrangement, and giving everyone the spotlight at different points, sort of like passing the baton around. And I find that, I mean, it can be done in any format of music, but I think that this lends itself to that more.
Yeah, it's I have a lot of thoughts on this because I listen to so much instrumental music, and I look at it kind of like the music is sort of like an engine that takes you somewhere, right? But you want the engine to take you somewhere. You don't want to be in the garage just watching it run, just like, wow, that's a nice engine, like look at those parts, like, you know what I mean? Like, I think that's the best metaphor I could think of, like, and I know that, yeah, some music, it can feel like that. It can feel like you're just looking at the engine, right? But some bands, it's like they have that power, and you get on it, and it's a rocket ship, and it just takes you to another world. Like, I think, and that's what, you don't want to be running in place. You want to be transported, and I think, it's also a personality thing. Like, I think with the Night Watch, like, it works really well because I love playing rhythm. I love being in the background. I love filling in space as a guitarist. Like, I think the electric guitar is underutilized as just like a background instrument. It can do so much as just like, it can fill so much space for other things. Like, some of the most satisfying guitar licks, it's like, today I was listening to the band Tortoise. They're like a band from Chicago, legendary instrumental band. Yeah, they're incredible. And their guitarist Jeff Parker, like, they'll just have like all these layers of vibraphone, and then he'll just be like, down, 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 down. And it's like, it's so satisfying, right? It's like he stepped in at just the right moment to like paint this part of the room, and I think that like with the Night Watch, we did a record called Boundaries, which is a 36-minute straight instrumental metal song, and like, I'm so proud that like there's zero shredding on it. And to me, like, as a progressive metal album, zero shredding, I'm like, to me, that's I love that challenge, because I love ideas. Like, when you listen to old prog, like if you listen to Yes, like the song And You and I, it's like, it starts off with these kind of like strummy chords, and then it's like, it's like, okay, what is that? And then it's like the bassist is like, do 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 clink, but like everybody's filling in a little place, and then all of a sudden you have all these like little things on their own that are not interesting at all. They're all working together and creating, and so you're sort of like, whoa, like I didn't even realize it, but now like I'm surrounded by like all these different sounds and all these different details, but none of them is like, stepping forward and trying to like be like, okay, everyone, like, I'm the most important detail. Like,
it's like a good sports team, It's like, the team that has like a lot of people that work really well together and work hard, is going to do better than the team that has one star player that has a lot of, talent and like, exceptional ability. It's like everyone kind of doing their thing, and, they're passing the ball around, and like, they're all working really hard, but not necessarily one person like shining more than the others. I think that's like, and there's a lot of bands that operate that way, and I think you kind of see it in like the quality of their music and the consistency of their output, Yeah.
I mean,
what's funny?
No, I was just about to say, like, going off topic a bit from the question, I mean, you could argue, like you said before, Nathan, with Tool, like, even though they're a vocal band, like that last album, it has, like you say, they're all working together, and there's bits where Maynard will drop out for like 8 minutes so that the guys can sort of connect and build, like I say, build this world that they try to create.
But that's why that band is so good, because like you've got Danny Carey, who's like doing all this really intricate stuff, and then you've got like Adam Jones, who's a very understated but very, very meticulous guitar player, who's dun, 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 dun. Like he's like, I'm really influenced by his style of playing, because he fits in just where he needs to, and then basically everything has its space, right? So when you're listening to it, you can look at all the individual parts, but then it comes together, right? So you've got the drumming, and then like Justin Chancellor's doing all this kind of like atmospheric or like very punchy bass stuff, and then like Maynard is like the icing, just like soaring, right? Like they each have their personalities, and they're all working. It all works together to create something that is bigger than just the individuals.
I think that last Tool record is pretty unusual when you think about the way it's mixed. Like if you compare that with another band with the same configuration, like to have the bass be that prominent and the vocals be that understated, like that's extremely rare. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like when you think about it, really, it's a pretty ballsy move. You know, I think it's great. I love it. But it's like, yeah, the bass is huge on that record. It's like it's such an integral part of the music, and it's so much in the focus. And the vocals I think are, like when you look at, you know, a traditional like rock mix, they're really low, but they work. I don't think they should be louder. I think that it's like, it's kind of also matches sort of the way, they're more like a collective as opposed to, you know, a band that has like a front man and it's always like, you know, the focus is and the eyes are on that person. And even though the way they perform on stage, obviously Maynard is in the back, not because of that stuff, but for acoustic reasons. It's still like it still kind of plays into that almost like a circular energy instead of a linear one.
And also just to build one more thing is that Raph is talking about the mix, and I think that's the other half when it comes to music and how you're able to transport people, right? And is you create that sound world, right? How is it mixed? Right? Yeah. How are you presenting, right? And me and Raph talk a lot about this with like food, right? Like to me, I think about music as food, and it's no wonder that we say, oh, I have musical tastes, right? Because, right, you think about a dish where all the spices work together, right? All the, you know, it's like you've got the pickled thing here and the bread here and the whatever. Like, I think that a good album is like that. It's like a meal where you're just like very satisfied. You get a little bit of everything, you know. And I mean, whatever. Sometimes you just want bread and cheese, you know. But I think Raph talking about the mix, that's really important, right? That really, you can write the song, but how you present it sonically to the listeners makes a huge difference, you know. Especially like with this album, we worked so hard on the mix because of how we wanted everything to appear.
Yeah, it makes a really different impression. I think it's actually pretty crazy that you could take stems of something that was recorded and, you know, give them to different people to mix or have a different process, and it's like almost like looking at a painting or something under different filters or like from different angles, or maybe it was painted with like slightly different, you know, the actual strokes are the same, but the brush and the paints were different, you know, something like that. It's pretty crazy, like how much of a drastic impact it has on the end result and how people view it and how people view the music. So I think often like people have a sense of what those songs are like, but that song is their impression of the song is colored by the mix that they're hearing and what that brings out, but more importantly, the overall atmosphere that it creates.